Welcome to the Confident Rider podcast. I'm Jane Pike, and you're about to get started with episode 19 of the show. If you're new around these parts, super awesome to be adventuring with you. Hit subscribe, and it'll be a weekly date. If you follow me on social media, and especially if you are part of my online program Joyride, you will be well acquainted with the three members of my happy herd. They are Dee, Nadia and Sausage. And Dee I wanted to bring into the spotlight today because of all of the horses I have had, he has really taught me the life-changing magic of continuing to show up. A bit of a backstory about us. I have had Dee since he was rising 2, and pretty much I bought him in all of the ways I recommend that you don't buy a horse. I saw him advertised online and I bought him sight unseen. Just in my defense, I did know the person that I was buying him off really well, and I also knew the person that she had bought him off, who incidentally was also the breeder. So I understood that the story I was being told was actually the story of his life up until that point. But I can genuinely say that from the moment he stepped off the truck and into my life, it has been nothing but a blessing, and we have been on a roller coaster of adventures ever since. Now, the reason that Dee is really important to me, one of the reasons, is because I have done all of the work with him myself. I grew up in Australia, my parents bred horses, and I trained and showed on the national circuit over there. So I'm quite comfortable with working with green horses and have certainly taken the reins fairly shortly after they'd been brought under saddle. But I've never gone through that entire process myself. And it's been on my bucket list to be able to work with a horse from the start and take them through to the point that I was able to. And Dee, I decided, was going to be that horse for me. The other reason why this was really important to me, and I think this is something that all of us have experienced if we have had, a degree of longevity in the horsing world or with horses in our lives, in that I have really worked hard over the last 10 years to learn more about horse behavior and really educate myself on how to give them the best deal possible. And a huge part of that is really understanding their motivations, understanding that what it is that they're offering me or offering us is an expression of how it is they feel at the time. It's an expression of their degree of safety, their degree of comfort, how it is they feel in association with us in that environment. And it is not an expression of personal, it's not personal, basically. And so if you can learn to separate yourself out and really get to the place where you're able to be responsive to what it is that they need rather than invested in the problem, you get yourself to a whole other horsing space. I feel, having learned all of this stuff, I really don't know how I worked with horses previously. Or I recognize the things that I missed, and I know that I have conversations all the time and read things online with people who use phrases like, oh, it was out of the blue, or he just did this and I was so angry with him because he knows what to do, and those kind of personal affronts that we take from our horses, which are so misplaced because it shows us that we are really lacking in true understanding of what it is our horses are trying to communicate. And I most definitely have fallen prey to that in the past also. That said, what I feel like I'm able to offer now is something that I couldn't offer before. I feel like I can actually work with horses in a way that recognizes what they need to an extent. I mean, there's also that thing of the more you know, the more you realize the less you know. So for a while there, I was a little bit immobilized by this idea of so desperately wanting to do the best that I could by them that I kind of didn't do much because I was concerned that I would get it wrong. But now I realize that if I stay responsive to what it is that they're offering me and reflect on what's happened, for better or for worse, and then reach out to people that I consider to be in my circle of awesome who do have a level of expertise that I don't in this area, then I can keep moving forward in a way that serves both of us without actually, getting to a place where we might cause some kind of permanent disruption. What I wanted to share with you specifically today was really how important it is to get into the mindset of continuing to show up. And I know that this is a commitment that I made to myself and that I made to Dee based on the recognition that there were going to be times throughout this process, throughout the process of doing things and bringing him under saddle myself, that were going to make me uncomfortable. They were going to make me uncomfortable because I was quite obviously pushing the parameters of my comfort zone. I was pushing the parameters on my comfort zone on every level, or am pushing the parameters of my comfort zone on every level, based on not only competency, but also confidence. And those two things are quite separate pieces of the puzzle. Competence-wise, I made the decision that I would continually check in with people. So I have 2 or 3 trainers that are also friends who I so admire and respect, and I am absolutely sending them messages and asking them questions every step of the way. If there is even a flickering that I feel like I need advice, or there's something that's come up that I'm not quite sure how to navigate. This is something that is a skill that I've mentioned before, and that is the skill of asking for help. And we can get so caught up in what that means for us. I think on a fundamental level, it's because we feel this need to prove ourselves, or that perhaps asking for help is going to reflect badly on us in some way. And so the place that I come from is that I have a responsibility to do this in the best way that I can, for the sake of my horse. And if I'm going to let my own ego get in the way of asking for help, then we have a fundamental problem before we even start. So I'm in this not to prove anything to anyone, but to improve rather, to really expand my skill set and to be able to develop a partnership with my horse that is something that reaches levels I haven't experienced before. And I recognize in order to do that, I need to be able to get over myself on certain occasions and ask people who are happy to tell me what's what. So really important, if you are one of those people that feels like you need to go it alone, or you never ask for help and you carry that around like some kind of badge of honor, just think about the disservice that you're doing not only to yourself but to your horse, because it's really costing you something. It's costing you something to stay in the place that you are based on feeling like we need to defend certain aspects of ourselves or what we do. And if we can step into that growth mindset place and say, everything is learnable, everything is figure outable, and we just have to be open and responsive and receptive to all of the knowledge that is out there and available to us, that we just need to open our hearts and minds to. So based on this idea that I was going to be consistently out of my comfort zone, I made the deal with myself and with Dee to show up. I think showing up is a superpower, consistently showing up, no matter what the conditions are, no matter what the itty bitty shitty committee is saying to me on that particular day, no matter how it is I'm feeling. I didn't want those factors to be the primary influence on how it is I arrive in the arena on any given day. The important thing to me is not to deny those feelings in the moment. So if I'm feeling apprehensive or unsure or even anxious, that's okay because there's valuable information in there. But my bigger intention is to create this wonderful partnership with my horse, to move through and learn the things that we don't currently know together, to take us from being on the ground to having a partnership under saddle. And in order to do that, I need to be consistent, and I need to show up, and I need to not give any fear or apprehension the wheel of the car. They can be a passenger, they can drive alongside me, but they don't get to decide where it is we go or how often it is that we do it. Where I think we go wrong, or why I think we stop showing up, is because we get attached to what showing up means or what success is going to mean in any particular session. There are a lot of opt-out clauses that we create for ourselves based on fixed ideas of success. And if you can let go of that, then you really create this space where you're able to be responsive to what it is that presents in the moment. And you can consistently show up because the only rule that you have to follow is the fact that you need to show up. That showing up is magic because not only does it create momentum, but it means that you are progressing forward in ways that may not even be visible to you in the moment. Now, to give you an idea about what I mean by a fixed idea of success, the blessing that I have at the moment is that my progress is very black and white right now. Because we are in such a formative stage of our riding adventures, there are very obvious targets that we want to hit. For example, that target of being on the ground to being in the saddle. I mean, that's a very clear step. And then making sure that we have a nice bend that we can disengage from and move into forward motion from, also a very clear step. We're not talking about refinement at this point. We're talking about very clear blocks of transitional moments that lead us from being in one situation to the next. And as a consequence of that, the clarity that that's brought me is that I can go into our training sessions being super intentional about what it is I'm looking for and what it is that I'm hoping to create in that session. That doesn't mean that that is actually what we are going to do, because obviously there are a whole lot of different factors which influence what we work on in any given moment. It's winter here in New Zealand right now and the weather is a little bit crazy. It's been really gusty and windy and we've had rain, which means that our round pen was, we put it in thinking that we would mainly use it over summer and spring. It's basically a piece of leveled ground which has a surface put down on it, but it hasn't got drainage. So I didn't really expect to be able to use it that much over winter. However, it's really solid underfoot. So half of it is like a little lake and the other half is dry, depending on where the lay of the land is. So, there's a whole lot of different factors which feed into what it is we might be doing at any one time. Ground conditions, weather, how it is that Dee's feeling on any particular day, how it is that I'm feeling on any particular day. However, all those things are quite separate to the fact we can continue to show up and do work within the possibility of what is available to us in that moment. Now, this fixed idea of success is a bit of a corker and it does get in our way, because something that I could get attached to is that now Dee is under saddle, I could get attached to the fact that every session we have to ride. And this is something that I've noticed come up with Joyride members a lot. They move to a certain aspect or a certain level of their riding, and all of a sudden they see everything that's going to happen moving forward as a movement from that place. When the reality is, training is like a cha-cha. Sometimes you move forward, sometimes it feels like you're taking a step back, but really that is just a reinforcement of the foundations or of everything that happened before, so that when you do actually move forward, that step is further consolidated. The way that I see it rolling out now, and this has been such a liberation to me, is that I show up and I am responsive to what presents in the moment. That means that if I look out the window and the conditions are that I'm able to get out there, so obviously safety first, guys, like I'm not wanting you to put yourself in a position where either you or your horse are compromised, but I get out there and I know that as long as I only go as far as the next good step, and this is my absolute motto, I only go as far as the next good step, then I'm not putting either myself or my horse in a space or a position where we are going to be pushed into that survival zone, so far out of our comfort zone that we lose that ability to be resourceful and to access the skills that are available to us. I'm really mindful of that because I want to set us up to have continually good experiences. When your success framework is responsive to the moment, you are able to continually show up because you don't need to project yourself to a space where you feel that you might be compromised. The anxiety that we get, or the apprehension or fear that we might experience around this consistency of showing up, is usually based on the idea that when we show up, we have to do something, and that doing something might be something really outside of our comfort zone. For example, I'm looking out the window now and it's really gusty. We're having these crazy winds that come through that are quite unpredictable. And they're challenging for me to maintain my zen in, let alone for a young green horse who hasn't had much experience under saddle. If my framework at this point was fixed on the idea that I needed to ride him, I could see how I could develop a fair amount of anxiety prior to even getting out there. However, that is not my framework. I know that today it's possible for us to do some work together. However, the work that we do might be very basic on the ground stuff, where I am focused on creating a foundation or a platform of calm and relaxation within this environment that is obviously not supportive of that. I think that training in all manner of conditions is really important, not only for your horse, but for ourselves, because often we put things off based on how we think our horse is going to respond, but it's very much a chicken and an egg situation. In windy conditions, I know that I get a bit scattered also. I get a bit anticipatory about what might happen or what it is that I need to look out for that might cause concern to my horse. And when I'm operating from that place, I'm already behind the 8 ball. My whole energetic projection, my whole feeling projection to my horse is one of concern, and that tips him off that he needs to be concerned. So I'm fueling the cycle of exactly what it is that I want to avoid. In order to get to a place where you don't do that, we need to practice putting ourselves in situations where things aren't perfect, where we are going to be triggered, but we can still maintain a sense of emotional equilibrium. We can still manage our focus towards creating the things that we want as opposed to trying to avoid the things that we don't want. And we can get ourselves to a place where we are actually responding to what it is that's presenting in the moment rather than our projections of what possibly might present in the moment. This is really important because a skill that we all need to develop is the skill of being able to sit in our direct experience without exaggerating or inflating the situation. And we exaggerate and inflate by adding a story to what it is that we're seeing. One of the practices that I have been developing myself and that I actually just created a whole pathway around in Joyride, it's called the presence pathway, is around that skill of being able to develop inner and outer awareness, of being able to recognize that it is possible for you to be emotionally autonomous without investing in whatever it is that your horse presents in that moment, and to develop a degree of stability within yourself that anchors you to the moment and prevents you from creating a story around it. We love to live in stories. This is a human condition. So if you find yourself observing something that your horse is doing, so maybe they frisk off in the arena and you think, oh, here we go. And in your mind's eye, everything from that moment becomes distorted and exaggerated. I mean, we've all done this. It's using our superpowers for evil instead of good. That is creating a story around your experience. And one of the things that I've been really working on in the presence pathway is you being able to separate yourself out from that, to develop an emotional language which allows you to pinpoint what it is that's going on, not only so that you're able to separate yourself out from the emotion as an experience, but so you can decide what action you need to take next. The differential between those two things, or between having that skill and not having that skill, means that if your horse is doing something in the arena that perhaps is not quite what you intended, instead of exaggerating that and taking yourself mentally and emotionally to a place that's not helpful, you actually can observe what's happening and say, oh, he's feeling too much pressure, or he's feeling anxiety, or he's feeling this, that, and the other. And then ask yourself, what is it that I can do now to move him towards a better feeling space? One of the reasons we get so caught up in the issues is because we ourselves become part of the problem. We fuse ourselves into the experience and we're unable to create that intentional space, that space between what it is that is presented and what it is that we're feeling. And as a consequence, we fuse ourselves within that dynamic and are unable to see things from an objective position. The other point that I want to make about why it's so important to show up is that if you are in a position where you feel concerned or anxious, or typically you are going through something which is pushing your buttons. So it may not mean that you identify so much with anxiety, but all of us have had those situations where we are at the limits of our comfort zone, and we know that for a period of time moving forward, that's not going to change. It might be that we're working on something in training, or we need to get through this phase with our horses to take us to the next step. For me, that's so apparent at the moment. Like, we are literally in the formative stages of getting things going under saddle, where steering is being established, where brakes are being established, all of the fundamentals which you really kind of like to have going on when you're under saddle. I am doing everything that I can on the ground to make sure that he understands the signals and that everything's comfortable. However, there are some things that can only be established by going there. And in order to be each other's courage encouragers, I don't want to allow too much time between drinks, so to speak. I don't want to allow too much time between rides. That space, so for instance, say if you ride on a Saturday and you are concerned about riding, or there's something that you need to be doing consistency in order to really master what it is that you're talking about. If you are concerned about that and you allow too much time of inaction between one ride and the next, what that gives you is a big space of marination time to really churn things over in your mind. Neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that the more you think about something, for better or for worse. So if you think about something in a concerned way, you create bigger neural pathways and thought networks around that feeling of concern, and the same works in the opposite direction. So knowing that, what we want to make sure is that we're not brooding or being concerned about or worrying about something for too long, because we're really allowing that thought process to create traction. And off the back of that thought process, we're creating a physiological experience of concern or of anxiety that our unconscious mind recognizes as real. What that means is, going back to our Saturday ride, if we ride on Saturday and we have concern and we don't show up on Sunday or on Monday or at the next available time that we're able to show up, but instead we flip it over in our mind, the ride, what might happen, what might not happen, what we want to avoid, all of the things that you might typically be concerned or worried about. On an unconscious level, if you're imagining that with enough vividity, is that a word? With enough clarity, I'm trying to throw in a few words there, with enough clarity, then your unconscious mind recognizes those riding experiences as real. And it might be that you've only ridden once or twice in a way that has created concern within you, but on an unconscious level, you've ridden as many times as you've thought about it. So we want to make sure that we really don't allow time for any unfavorable thought patterns to grow stronger. That said, if you don't have the opportunity to ride on a consistent basis and you are trying to overcome feelings of concern or anxiety at the moment, it's really important that you don't let yourself brood over these things. One of the last modules that I produced for the RISE pathway in Joyride, which is all about performance under pressure, is an intervention process that prevents this from happening, where you really look at what it is that you thought didn't go right on your ride. You think about what changes you would like to make in order to course correct that path, and then you visualize or step into that actually happening. So being really constructive or proactive about the types of experiences that you want to create, even if they only exist in your mind's eye currently, is really important, because it means that we are not adding fuel to some of the thought patterns that we don't want to be there and growing them in ways that don't help us the next time we actually come to work with our horse. What we know about amygdala-based anxiety also, which is anxiety that is coming about as a result of an emotional or environmental trigger, is that if you leave the scene of the crime, in inverted commas, or you leave the scene of the experience that's causing you anxiety and don't go back to it or see it through to the extent where the anxiety is dissipated, then you actually reinforce that anxious feeling. So it is really important to consistently show up, to get out there and do what it is that you can with your horse as soon as you are able, to keep that momentum going and to make sure that you are actually incrementally moving forward in a way that serves you both. What I want you to do now is make a resolution for yourself to continually commit to showing up for the sake of you and your horse. The disclaimer, or the happy card that we get to draw as a part of this, is you only have to go as far as the next good step. You're never going to put yourself or your horse in a position where you feel completely out of your comfort zone or compromised in any way if you adhere to that philosophy. If you're really paying attention to what it is that your horse is presenting to you and taking proactive measures to move you both to a better feeling space. Cultivating confidence and really breeding momentum comes with that consistency. So I would love you to join me. Let's make some kind of resolution or proclamation together that over the next couple of weeks, you are going to show up X number of times for your horse, and you can jump online and tell me all about it. A cool way to do this is to have a look at what time is available over the next couple of weeks for you to get out there and do something with your horse. Block that off in your calendar, so actually make the commitment to show up on those days, and then get out there and do what is possible for you given the environment and the circumstances and the mood of the moment. Be responsive to what it is that your horse offers you and work to move both you and them towards a better feeling space. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It is always a pleasure. I mentioned a couple of pathways in there that are in my online program, Joyride. Presence pathway, which is all around developing awareness, and the Rise pathway, which is for performance under pressure. If either of those take your fancy, you can check them out further on my website, confidentrider.online/joyride. I would very much love you to join me. I really consider it to be a situation of us adventuring together rather than me telling you what's what. Everything that I talk about in the stories with my own horses and the way that I go about things are in Joyride. It is my modus operandi for how I not only navigate my horsing life, but how I navigate life in general. And I know that there have been hundreds of riders who are in the program or have been through the program that have really come out the other side of their challenges as a result. So if you want to be a part of that, once again, confidentrider.online/joyride. And that aside, I will talk to you again next week. So happy riding.